My dad's side and my mum's side hate each other.
Are they divorced?
Yeah, they don't mesh well with each other at all. Like my mum's side and my dad's side hasn't interacted in probably a decade.
Wow.
So they don't want any. I literally asked them about it as well. My dad's side, they're a bit more open, because my dad's aunt is more like, not my dad's aunt. My aunt from my dad's side is more open, but
Do you speak to them in English?
yeah.
Do you know any like Bengali?
I know a little bit.
You know
but
a
I
little
kind of lost my tongue because we never spoke Bengali at home. And in school, obviously, we didn't speak Bengali, it was English. And in mosque, we didn't really speak Bengali as much. So my mother's tongue is gone. And that made me even more of an outcast. We said, look at what the white man done to him, da da da.
Wow.
And all kind of stuff. And I remember I used to get called English boy because, I was too white,
Really?
Yeah, because I was too white for the brown people, but I was too brown for the white people.
Yeah.
So, I'm just, what the hell do I do? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Renecide podcast. I'm here today with Elias. How's it going, sir?
Very, very well.
So
I'm very excited to be here.
I mean, you better be excited, mate.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited to be on a podcast.
So I don't know how to introduce this because it's very different per person. Because obviously the early episode with Hassan, which is your business partner. Now, me and you, we got a lot to talk about.
We do.
I've always struggled talking to people from my own kind.
As in like Asians.
Yeah. And people our age especially. Because their mindset's very like a cookie cutter mindset.
Right.
It's very similar to one another. But you are different. That's the thing. Because you're a bit more open. So that's why I decided to have you on. Now, who this person is, he's an entrepreneur. And also, you're an engineering student as well.
Yes.
And I wanted to have you on because not only are you driven, not only do you have things to say, but I feel like we see eye to eye on some certain things.
Those are very kind words. Very
kind
words.
Man. See, this is like every single guest I have on, I have respect for, And I wouldn't put anyone on the podcast I don't have respect for. Unless if it's like some sort of debate, I guess, in a way. Maybe not a debate, but it's more like I want to understand your perspective. You want to understand mine. Let's respectfully have a conversation. So today we're going to talk about religion and culture and growing up as a Muslim. What's it like for you to grow up as a Muslim?
It depends on the context, really. I think growing up Muslim, like here in the UK.
Yeah, like your experiences growing up as a Muslim.
I think it's been pretty good. I think you hear stories about the people who are slightly older than us, like 5, maybe 6 years older, who experienced 9/11 a little more clearly. But they are still young, so it's not like our parents' generation who were already fully developed adults when 9/11 happened. Because I think if you're going to talk about being Muslim and you're going to talk about your experience as a Muslim, you can't ignore the blatant elephant in the room, which is politics. Like I said, 9/11. I think my experience of being Muslim has been pretty good overall. I'm a pretty well versed person in like conversations in general. Like, so I don't really have an issue with talking to Muslims or to non-Muslims or anything like that. So I think from young, I've had issues with religion in terms of like being able to follow it.
Yeah,
like
I get
properly,
you.
as in praying 5 times a day, that sort of stuff. But my experience has been okay. There isn't really anything that I can think of off the top of my head where I think, that's something that I wish I could change. I mean, my parents are quite open-minded.
You're so fortunate.
Within like the context of being like Muslim and being like first-generation immigrants to the country. Yeah. Because like I'm Afghan, so Afghans are quite conservative people in general. I think people don't really because the Afghans, our population in the UK isn't as high as everyone else. Pakistanis and
Bengalis.
Yeah, so our population is slightly less, so people are a little less aware of what sort of culture Afghans have, and they are very conservative. Afghans as a whole, quite conservative people. But I think my parents, within that context, they are quite open-minded. I mean, if you compare them to like a Pakistani family that's been here for like 5 generations, it might be a little different. But within first generation context, they are pretty open-minded. They do give me a little creative liberty to kind of, make my own decisions. So I'm pretty fortunate in that regard.
Speaking of own decisions, do you think it's a good idea for like, I'm not sure if you have the same experience as me, but when obviously I was a child, I was forced to go to mosque, forced to believe in this, forced to believe in that. Do you think parents and families should be more open in people's beliefs, like their child's beliefs? So if they want to be a Christian, if they want to be agnostic, do you think it's a good idea, or do you think they should just go down the Islamic route?
See, on the surface of it, if you just say, like, of course you should be open-minded, that's always the right thing to say. Like, you should always have an open mind, regardless of what the topic is. Because there is, like, I think it's everyone's idea of what's good for you and what's bad for you is just based off what they know, like knowledge, their experience, that sort of stuff. It's sort of like a bubble you create for yourself. So I think for our parents, for your specific case, where your parents sort of forced you to go to mosque and behave in a certain way, I think it's not even just, I think it's just all they know, and I think it's hard for us to like go up to them and be like, hey, be more open-minded, because they don't see what we see, it's different colors. So yeah, I think we should be more open-minded, 100%. It's hard for some, like a Muslim, to go up to a Christian and say, hey, your religion is wrong. And it's hard for them to say the same to a Muslim. But it's interesting because we can't just kind of, one thing I was thinking about a few days ago, right, was young brown British Muslims. Okay, I think like Arab Muslims are slightly different in the context because they haven't been in the UK for nearly as long. I think Indians, Pakistanis, Bengalis, now Afghans, we have been in the UK for a little longer than other types of Muslims, like other ethnicities. So I think one of the things that I think at least I'm starting to see is that the difference between generations is huge.
It is too huge.
I have a friend who I study with, and their parent is a primary school teacher, born and raised in the UK. They're of Pakistani background. I love saying it like that. Pakistani. Where you from, bro? I'm Pakistani, yeah, and their parents are well educated and that sort of stuff. And even you tend to get the impression that well educated people are a little more open minded. But even in that context, her parents are not that open minded, and yet they've been here for many generations. And she's completely open minded. She's a whole different breed of human being. Like she will say and do whatever she wants. And I think that's quite interesting because you don't really get that impression, like it's hard for someone who's maybe in their mid-30s, Muslim, born in the UK, for us to sit down, so someone our age, right, for us to sit down and have a conversation with them, because like you said, that is the case for the cookie cutter approach. But I think it's changing. I think young Muslims are a little more open to just saying what we think. But I think it's also quite dangerous. There was a really famous quote. It's something about like knowledge is having the ability to see. I think it's something about wisdom is having the ability to move. So you got to be careful with what you say, even if you know it. Sometimes people are just not ready to hear what you have to say. You got to be careful with that approach. Like my parents, for example, I mean, I wouldn't just talk to them about anything, about politics, religion, or anything like that, just openly, because you got to understand the context. There's if you pull at elastic band too hard, eventually you'll have to snap, or it will go all the way in the other direction. So you got to be careful what you say. But I think growing up as Muslim, we're getting better at it.
Thankfully.
I think people are like, especially young Muslims, we're starting to kind of get a better balance of being Muslim, being brown, being, from an Asian background, and also being British, being European, having a little more open-minded approach. I think it's better. I think the mix is starting to happen. It's taken a while, but we are starting to boil up to a better point.
Do you think, because thankfully we're getting better, obviously, but it's taken quite a long time to get to a very more open-minded, more accepting state of the culture. There is I know you kind of talked about this briefly before we started filming. Like, obviously when we first met. But bear in mind, this is our second time meeting, by the way.
Yeah.
So we don't even fully know each other in a way.
No.
But there's two sides to being a Muslim. Right? There's two different groups. So it's sort of like, Romeo and Juliet, there's like Montagues and the Capulets and all that kind of stuff. Why do you think there's such a divide between the two groups? And do you think those two groups will become one?
When you say two groups, like what?
The Shia and the Sunni Muslims.
Shia and Sunni. Well, I think it's not really the case for young Muslims. Well, that's not actually true.
Yeah.
I do sometimes. So like, I'm Shia. I'm very proud to be Shia. But for political reasons, I think one thing, you're a good example. Like, you're probably. I know that the first conversation me and you had, you didn't seem very well versed in the whole topic, like the Islamic divide.
I don't really know about it at all.
Yeah, so like that's the impression. That's what you get from most like young Muslims. Like the whole Sunni Shia divide isn't really that well known for most Muslims, mostly because like Shias are only like 10-15% of the Muslim population, and in the UK we're even less. So you don't really get to meet a lot of Shias. But for political reasons, like a long time ago, after the Prophet's death, peace be upon him, there was a divide in who should be the Islamic leader.
Yeah.
And the Shias basically said they wanted his cousin to be in charge, and then another group said no, they wanted his right hand man to be in charge. And ever since then, there's been a huge divide in the approach, but initially it was just political. It had very little to do with differences in Islamic values. If me and you, if you came to my home and my mom was like, oh, it's time to pray, there'll be very little difference in how we prayed. It's almost exactly the same. There are some differences in the way we place our hands when we pray, but besides that, it's almost exactly the same. The divide is very political. Very little to do with Islam.
It's more like left wing, right wing. Do you think, or is it?
No, it's more not really left wing, right wing. It's more just sort of. No one. I mean, I didn't choose to be Shia, and no one chooses to be Sunni. Like Sunnis are what most Muslims are. And even then, like most Sunnis don't know about Sunnis. Like they just kind of think all Muslims are like them as well.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, there are different types. Like you get Catholics and you get Christians, but they all believe in Christianity as a whole. It's that same sort of principle, but Shias are a very small group in Islam, and it's all political. It's all political. There's very little actual divide, really. It's something political happened 1400 years ago, and now you have like geopolitics between Shia countries like Iran and Sunni countries like Saudi Arabia, and they're just going at it. Both of them Muslim, but they're not very. They use it as a pawn. You get their impression, right? A lot of people are sort of. A lot of groups, whether it's the UK, whether it's Germany, America, Canada, Iran, Saudi Arabia, whichever country it is, every country has some sort of like puppet that they like to use. We like to be in a lot of groups. A good example is football. Like I'm part of a group in football, and that's you call that a club. You call that a football, culture. So like if I support Tottenham, I'm not gonna go and just be willy-nilly with someone who supports Arsenal. No, like they're against me. That's not part of my group. And it's a lot more trivial in football because it's just football at the end of the day.
Yeah,
but people it's not that deep. But people have tribes in real life, and I think governments, Shia and Sunni governments, exploit that. Like me and you, like we don't have any issues about the Sunni Shia divide because we don't really talk about it. It's not really a part of our discourse, right?
That's true.
And most people don't have that issue. Most of my friends at uni are Sunni. I have very few Shia friends, mostly because there isn't many. But the Sunni Shia divide, it has more to do with our parents.
That's to do with us.
Yeah. And this is what we were saying, right? The generational divide between young Muslims and slightly older Muslims is not just the Sunni Shia divide, but it's also our approach to issues. Like I think it's safe to say, I mean, it's not really substantiated by any facts or evidence, but I get the impression that young Muslims are a little less concerned with what you are, and they're a little more concerned with what you say. I think for my parents' generation and the generations before them, and the same for probably the same for your generation and the generations before you, if you are a certain thing, if you're Bengali and then you want to talk to a Pakistani, the idea is like, oh, you're talking to a Pakistani, right? Like that tribal mentality is a lot more prevalent in older generations. I think for younger generations, it's not necessarily the case.
Because we're more accepting who we date and who we go out with. But the
100%.
parents will be like, oh, you're marrying a person that's not Bengali.
Yeah.
You know, you're breaking the cycle, you're breaking the chain, you're going against me. And I think, do you think there's a bit of racism going on?
Oh, 100%. There's a lot of racism in brown culture.
Because people say like brown people, black people can't be racist. Brown people, like from my perspective, they told me, you know, when I was a kid, don't hang out with the white kids and don't hang out with the black kids. And I don't know, like in my core when I was a kid, I didn't know what intuition meant. I didn't know what gut feeling was. I didn't know why they would say that, but I'll still hang out with them anyway, and I'll get shamed for it by other brown kids in my neighborhood. And I mean, I'm kind of throwing them out. They're not going to watch this anyway. Who cares? But it's a shame because if I get married, I'm not. You know how like people have certain types, like my type is Asian, my type is Caucasian. My type isn't really Bengali at all.
What is your type?
I don't like.
Do you like white girls?
They're in the category. Yeah. I like Asians, like Japanese and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Oriental. Yeah. Caucasian. Yeah. Mixed race and all kinds of stuff. Like, I don't know. I just didn't really find Bengali attractive. That's just not to say Bengalis aren't attractive, obviously, because I'm Bengali myself. I'm a handsome motherfucker. But it just, I didn't really. If I fall in love with them, I fall in love with them. Yeah. But if I fall in love with a Oriental girl, then chances are like I'll have no family in my wedding.
What's your relationship like with your parents then?
Not good.
Not good.
My family's not good at all.
Really?
No, because I'm gonna go for a little history lesson in a second.
What's your story? What is your story? How is your relationship like with your parents? And like when you were a kid, what was it like? Because based on what you've said, I don't really have nearly as much of an issue with my parents. My relationship with my parents is very, very good. Yeah, and it's not even necessarily like they are conservative Muslims at the end of the day. They are Orthodox Muslims. They pray 5 times a day. Yeah. They are what you would call traditional Muslims. But I think the good thing about me and my older brother is because we're both born in Afghanistan, we came with our parents to this country. We have a good grip on what our parents expect and what the new generation, the European Muslims, the Western Muslims kind of expect from you. So we have that good balance and act. But I mean, were you born here?
Yeah, I was born here.
Right. So were your parents born here?
That's a good question. I don't really know much about my parents at all.
Really?
I don't really know much about my family history at all. Because even if I asked them, it would be considered rude. Because you're up in my business, da da da.
Do you live with your parents?
Live with... So it's about to get interesting. I live with my grandparents and my youngest uncle. But I don't speak to any of them.
Wow.
But in the other, literally like 20 seconds away, like down the street, is my mum's house. That's where my clothes are, that's where I shower. And the reason why I shower there is because my uncle doesn't want me showering in his house. It's a bit interesting because he doesn't like me, basically. He doesn't want me anywhere in... So
you live with him, but you don't shower in his house?
No, I just stay in my room. And the reason why I stay in that room is because there was no space in my mum's house. Hence why I moved to my uncle's house for my own bedroom. Because there was no space there and I don't want to share a bed because I want my own setup, basically. Yeah. So that's why I'm over there, if that makes sense. So
that must be difficult.
It's, I just put my headphones on. I just mind my business, That's it.
So when you after this podcast, when you go home, you just don't chat to anyone in your family?
Oh, I don't chat to anyone in my family.
No way.
I just don't speak to anyone in my family.
How does that feel like?
It sucks. It sucks. Yeah. It sucks. So that's why you seen Peace of Man lesson, right? Yeah. You've seen a bit of it at least. Yeah. So you already know my childhood. It was a pretty happy childhood. I played out with my friends, kicked ball. Yeah. Did a bit of trouble, that kind of stuff. Not legal trouble, but knocking on the door, running away. But it's just other than that, my family history is just, it's always been split. My dad's side and my mum's side hate each other.
They divorced.
Yeah, they don't mesh well with each other at all. My mum's side and my dad's side hasn't interacted in probably a decade. Wow. So they don't want any. I literally asked them about it as well. My dad's side, they're a bit more open. because my dad's aunt is more like, not my dad's aunt, my aunt from my dad's side is more open. But
Do you speak to them in English?
yeah.
Do you know any like Bengali?
I know a little bit.
You know
but
a
I
little
kind of lost my tongue because we never spoke Bengali at home. And in school, obviously, we didn't speak Bengali, it was English. And in mosque, we didn't really speak Bengali as much. So my mother's tongue is gone. And that made me even more of an outcast. We said, look at what the white man done to him,
Wow.
and all kind of stuff. And I remember I used to get called English boy because, I was too white,
Really?
Yeah, because I was too white for the brown people, but I was too brown for the white people.
Yeah.
So, I'm just, what the hell do I do? And the fact that I looked ugly back in the day, I'm still model.
You're a handsome looking man. Man.
Thanks. Right. Not a buffet, man. Come on. But, right, obviously back then, I was 14 stone, 15 stone. I was a big guy. And bear in mind, my height was like 5'6", 5'5". So I was
That's
short.
even worse.
That's bad.
Short and fat is not
short and fat is ultimate target.
Yeah, I had the same issue. I was short and fat when I was a kid. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the reason why we kind of mesh well, because we had that similar experiences. But back to the family topic, I want to speak to my mother because I'm about opening up about her to my mental health back in 2012, 2013. And she just kind of just said, get over it. And
wow.
Because the bit of context, about an hour before, I was at mosque. This was on a Saturday around 12 p.m., 8 p.m. Yeah. It was lunchtime. I remember the kids were picking on me and I just ran home. I was crying. I was running home. This when I was 13, 12. And I just entered into my mum's house. I had the keys. And I just cried on the couch. And then 10 minutes later, my mum came in because she had a break from work. So I don't know why she came in. I mean, probably to get food or something. And she just saw me crying and she just kind of shouted at me for, crying and also not being at mosque. So committing a sin and also being too soft because I'm a guy. So that's like lose as well. And she just told me to just snap out of it, and she just judged me for depression and all kind of stuff. And I told my dad about it, and then he told my mum, and then it just kind of said whatever, or just you could just get over it, snap out of it. Just you don't pray enough, And that's why I believe there's so much toxicity within the culture that I had to separate myself from my mother and father. And on top of that, I had to separate myself from my family members as well. Because I remember when I lost weight, I got told I was too anorexic. And when if I'm fat, they literally made fun of me for being too obese. And now they shame me for being too skinny. So it's I lost the weight for you. You're not accepting me. What do I need you?
That sounds like a very difficult situation.
I literally said it directly to me in real life and through message as well.
Wow.
And
I give you credit for you've turned out to be a very well-rounded individual, but to not have your family as a support system, that must have been very difficult.
And they wonder why is he not speaking to us? Why is he not saying this and that?
So do they want to talk to you, or is it just sort of you both parties are just sort of let's not talk to each other, or is it do you both want to reconcile the issues you have, or is it just sort of everyone's just given up?
Everyone's just given up.
Really?
We try to reconcile, but it's just their mindset. It's just I can't be around that type of energy.
Wow.
Because last conversation I had with my dad was in Ramadan.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, Ramadan is the time of fasting, and it's for 30 days.
Yeah.
This was back in July or June.
Yeah, roughly around.
Roughly July, June 2020. So summer 2020. And he messaged me it was about a job, a detective job. I know, me being a detective is kind of weird, but
what do you mean detective? Like an actual
work? Yeah,
really?
I know, just my dad was do you want detective work for earning money? I was like, fuck it, sure. But it was a bit weird because he said expect a call, and I was like, what time, what day, what kind of stuff, and he just said, oh, just whatever. So I'm like, well, I'm not gonna be on my phone all the time. I got shit to do. So he said, did they call you yet? And I said, they did, but I wasn't on my phone. So he just said what's wrong with you? You're still stuck in your bubble. He said, are you fasting? All that kind of stuff. Probably patronizing me because, I'm too white. That's the thing. And I said, why does it matter if I'm fasting or not? To you, because it's my life and what I'm trying to do. And then he started blaming my mother, so his ex, and for being oh, your mother's the reason why you're in this state, right now. and he just pretty much like demonized me to some sort of like sinner.
Wow.
And I just told him like, look, I'm gonna be. I said it straight. I was like, I'm gonna be more of a success than you'll ever be. And he said, you'll never be a success if you don't pray enough. And if you don't have God in your life, you'll never be anything. And I just said, no, all right, cool, if that's what you believe. But at the end of the day, I promise you, I will be more of a success than you and the entire family combined. And I mean that, because I'm not doing this for me, you know. I'm doing this for all the other brown kids that committed suicide because they weren't accepted. And because I remember I almost like take my own life one too many times. And the fact that I'm alive today, I don't know if it's because I'm agnostic. Just to clarify, I'm not an atheist. I believe there's something out there, but I don't know what. I think the reason why I'm here is to become the greatest filmmaker of all time and change the world. That's it.
In what sense?
Change the world as in like make people more open emotionally, especially within our culture as well. Because how many brown filmmakers do you know? You know, how many brown people open up like this? I want to make that more normalized because I don't see it, I don't hear it. So I'm going to be the one to like spark the change. And I know I kind of went on a bit of a tangent.
Do you want like a family? Like,
I would love to have a family.
And like, how would you raise your kids differently from what your parents did? Well, that's if you want kids, at least. I
want them to realize that they can speak to their father. No, I'm not going to demonize you for not believing in a certain religion. I'm not going to shame you for having depression or suicidal thoughts. Because a load of kids, they don't talk about their depression, suicidal thoughts to their parents. And I just want to let them know that, you know, you can speak to your father, you can speak to your mother, and I'm here for you, literally. Like, you're my child, like, I'll literally die for you, And it's just crazy to think about, because I never thought I'd be doing this. I always thought I don't know, it's a bit self-righteous, but I always thought I'll be somebody. But if I decided to like water myself down to just being Azamia, then I'll probably just end up being a nobody. I'll be loved by my family, but I'll end up doing something I don't like, and I'll be with people that don't really respect me for who I am because I water myself down. So yeah, it's crazy to think about how my life just turned out like that. So when you said you'll have a good relationship with your parents, you know, obviously I assume you have dinner with them and...
Well, I mean, I live in Birmingham now, but I still live with my parents, like, when I'm not at university.
Yeah.
And, like, my relationship with my parents, well, the thing is that you have to sort of, like, my parents are first-generation refugees, basically. Like, they came from Afghanistan because of war. Me, my older brother, and my parents, we all came because of that, right? And it's hard for individuals to just be like, to banter your parents. Like, I banter my parents, my mum and my dad. Like, we have jokes. Like, my relationship with them is fantastic. I couldn't ask for a better relationship with my parents. But it's not sort of like the relationship you would typically assume is like, oh, this is fantastic. Like, I wouldn't tell my mum or dad about the things I get up to at university, like my friends or anything like that. I wouldn't talk to them about football. I wouldn't talk to them about basically my personal life. And that's not because I don't want to. It's just because that's not the relationship I have with my parents.
It's just boundaries at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, it's sort of boundaries. Like, my parents, I talk to my parents about things that are relevant to our relationship. So things to do with family, you know, maybe family politics, maybe, you know, my mom and dad might need help with something. Might talk to them about our history, about our grandparents, that sort of stuff, right? But I think one of the benefits I think I'm sort of lucky to have is that I'm able to speak 2 languages. So my mother tongue, which is Farsi, and then my English as well. So I can talk to my parents on their level, in the sense of like, being Afghan, being religious, being conservative, you have to behave in a certain way. You can't just talk about whatever you like. And I think I know that because I wasn't born here. I'm Afghan by nationality. I was naturalized when I came here, but I'm still very firmly tied to my roots. So I think my parents know that. My brother is the same situation. So it's the same situation with my brother. I think one thing that, I mean, it sounds really difficult to say this, but I think something you could have probably massively benefited from is having your mother tongue with you at all times.
100%.
Because, there's always, things always get lost in translation. Always. I mean, if I spoke, my mum, she is one of the few Afghan women that I know that started educating herself here in the UK. So she went to college, she studied English. And her English is fantastic. It's great. But I wouldn't talk to her in English like ever. Because like it's that there's a famous there's not so famous. I watched this video of a polyglot. Someone who speaks multiple different languages, right?
Yeah.
And he went into a corner store in New York, and the guy he spoke Hindi, I think, something like that, right? And the guy was saying in Hindi is that like if you want to talk to someone's head, like brain, basically, talk to them in your language. If you want to talk to someone's heart, talk to them in their language. And it makes an awful lot of sense. Because like, if I want to tell my parents something very important, something that needs to be done urgently, or something that's very important to me, or maybe to my sister, or whoever it is, it will have to be in Farsi, no matter what. Like, even if someone was to sort of ask me to say something to my parents, and it's something very important, it has to be in their native tongue. Just because I think one of the things about English, right, is that it's because its roots are so different to Arabic and Farsi and Hindi, right? Certain things cannot be expressed the same way. I think the way I talk to my parents is very, very much an Afghan way of approaching it. And I think that's something I'm very fortunate to have, really. I do feel sorry for people who don't have that in their locker, because it's something, it's like a cheat. It's like
GTA cheat, man.
It's a cheat card. It really is. It's like a cheat code. You just type it in and you're good to go, man. So yeah, I hear stories about people who are in the same situation as you, who can't really chat to their parents like that. Even now, my little brother who can speak Farsi, who knows who understands it, who gets it. Even him, he kind of, he doesn't really chat to my parents like I chat to my parents, just because he can't. But I think with age, he will get there.
Yeah.
I think we are very fortunate. I think growing up Muslim is one thing, but we are very, very fortunate as a family to have a very cohesive family unit.
That's very rare from what I see as well, because you're from Bedford.
Yeah.
I just can't expose your location.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're cool with that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not saying your address or anything.
Fine.
But I'm not sure what your culture's like, but when it comes to Northampton, right?
Yeah.
Every Brown family knows every Brown family.
Yeah. Same for Bedford.
Same for you as well.
Yeah, same for Bedford.
And the bad thing about that is, if my family doesn't really know about me being depressed and suicidal in the past. If my family found out, that means other Brown families will find out as well. And then it'll spread around, and then it'll give a bad image.
It's them Asian aunties, isn't it?
Yeah, Asian, they're fucking gossiping.
Spreading rumors.
It's so annoying. Like, keep your mouth shut.
Yeah.
They're always up in your business. Like, get lost. Like, why not?
I get that.
But it just, one thing that stops Brown kids from opening up is because reputation.
100%.
Families maintain this high level reputation because they just want to look good, especially in Asian weddings. Prime example, Asian people have 2 weddings, just to let you know.
Yeah.
One is the materialistic wedding, which is like saris, expensive jewelry that they rented maybe, spent like Hummers and limos and all kind of shit with like a little ribbon on top. So all that materialistic shit. But it's not the wedding though. That's like the religious weddings to religiously get married, because they're not legally married in that certain wedding. And then the second wedding is when they get legally married. Yeah. So I now pronounce you husband and wife to that. So basically, Asian wedding, white wedding. Those are 2 weddings.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see, because when I'm at Asian wedding, usually they don't really like each other. Some of them, really? Like some people in the Asian wedding, they don't like the bride or don't like the groom. Yeah. And I'm just like, why are you here if you don't like it? But it's like materialism, basically. And the bride and the groom, or whoever runs the whole wedding, they will kind of want to show, look at our family. Yeah. We're grand, we're great, we're loving, happy family. But, just kind of like to rub it in their faces to be like, oh, look at what we got. Do you have this? And then they kind of like one-up each other in this whole fake image, and then eventually come crashing down. And it's just it hurts to see, because I feel like people just don't want to be real with their situation, and it makes people less human. Because if you're like, oh, let me show my jewelry, nothing wrong with jewelry and cars and all that kind of stuff. That's all great. But if you don't own it, if you like flaunt off like materialistic shit, if you flaunt off a false image of a family, then it's gonna set an unrealistic expectation to like meet it.
100%. 100%.
So I just hope that
with stuff like that though, with Asian parents and the way not even Asian parents, Asian communities, but not necessarily it's not even limited to Asians. It's just sort of I think it's a global thing. People like to stay within their own community, stay within their own clique, their group, whatever you want to call it. And I think it's sort of like it's their safety net, And if you come out and you're one of them and you're like, hey, I'm depressed, or I feel lonely, or I feel this, or I feel that, or I don't agree with this part of the religion, or I think my politics is this, and it's out of line with the majority. You sort of have to realize that when you make that public, when you say these sorts of things, you are taking a knife and you are cutting up that fabric, and this fabric is sort of holding everyone up. And it might not be a great fabric. It might be built on dodgy foundations. It might not be, honest or genuine, and it's very, like you said, materialistic. But that is the social fabric that these people rely on.
Holds them together.
It holds them together, and without it, and a really good one is sort of like for people who come from less developed countries, who've escaped poverty and who aren't particularly educated. That social fabric is their survival. Without it, they wouldn't be able to live. A lot of people who come from these backgrounds, without their group to always be there, to always give them a lending hand, they wouldn't be able to feed themselves. So much of people's livelihoods is dependent on people from their own community coming and shopping at their store, or buying their bread, or tutoring their kids. I think it's something like a pound in the Asian community circulates for 20 days, which is higher than any other community, Jewish, white, black, whatever, whichever community it is. The pound circulates in the Asian community more than any other community in the whole of the country. And it's even better when you look at it from places back home. You can take India, for example, where you have like south of India, which is so different to the north of India. So India is a bit of a weird one, because there's so many different groups, so many different languages, and yet we just call it India, right? That's what you get for imperialism. In India, for example, you have different groups, and those groups stick with each other and they look after each other. And like you said, there are some massive, obvious side effects and consequences. They have to flaunt themselves. They have to get a whole load of gold. They have to show off what sort of things they have in terms of material wealth, and those are like sort of the things you don't want. But the things that you do get out of this is, it's safety. You never have to worry. I think one of the benefits of me being Afghan and being the part of the community that I am is that wherever in the country that I am, I can call someone up and they'll have a bed for me. And that is one of the best things about having a community. It is. Like I'm not particularly worried. I remember last summer we went to Snowdon in Wales. And our car broke down. We had two cars because we were quite a big family. The car that I was in broke down halfway through, and we were stuck at a petrol station. And the closest person we knew who could help us out was living in Stoke, which is about an hour drive from where we were. And we were in the middle of nowhere. So mind you, it's not easy to get out to us, but we managed to call someone out in Stoke, and they drove all the way to the middle of nowhere where we were, helped fix the car. And then when the car broke down again, we just left the car there and we just drove all the way back to his house. We slept, and then the next morning we came back and tried to fix the car. It's stuff like that.
That's a beautiful thing about the culture.
Yeah.
Because like you kind of have like the similar values.
Yeah.
So they trust you more.
100%. I don't think I would be who I am without being Afghan. I disagree. I firmly disagree with a lot of the things that happen in my community, especially like stuff like backbiting and judging people. I'm very upset that that's the kind of situation that we're in, where you
Yeah.
have people just judging people for decisions that they decide to make. You know, like if you decide you want to go drinking, or if you decide you don't want to pray, or you don't want to fast, or in fact you just want to marry someone outside of your community,
That is key.
that's sort of your decision. You know, live and let live. It's not for me to decide what you should do with your life. But the flip side of that is that once you have a community like that, you know, putting aside all of its sort of undesirable features, that community is always going to be there for you, especially if you don't take a knife and cut the fabric up too much, you know. If you're somewhat obedient, I think is the word, you know, if you're somewhat obedient, I think you're okay. But from your perspective, I do feel like well done, because you did it without that social fabric, and that is not easy whatsoever.
Barely survived though.
But you did.
But I did. That's the thing.
And that's like that's hustler mentality, that, you know.
Man,
I can see you will get somewhere with that sort of attitude.
I fucking hope so, man. I've been doing this shit for a long time. I've been through so much. I mean, obviously, I haven't like starved or I haven't been homeless and nothing like that. But man, it just, a lot's happened, and I'm just glad that I could finally talk about it to another person from my community.
Yeah.
Because I can't talk to 99% of the people about it, because I'll just get shamed, and I'll just get being like, oh, well, that's what white people do.
But you know, I think you are sort of in a bubble in that sense, because if you were to just hang out with the people that I'm friends with, I have a Afghan friend who, no names, but he was born and raised in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
He's Afghan through and through. His language is fluent. Like, he has no issues. Like, if you put him in a group of fully grown Afghan men, he would be able to sit and hold his own in a conversation. He understands not just British Afghan culture, but Afghan culture from back home. He frequently goes back. And if you were to sit down with him and have a conversation, he wouldn't have an issue with anything you say. He's one of the few people who is from a different generation to me and you, who's slightly older, slightly more traditional, but would come on a podcast and be like, hey, yeah, you know, these are my values. I pray 5 times a day. I'm a very religious man. But if you want to go and marry a Filipino girl or a Chinese girl, it's not really for me to say or do anything about, you know.
100%.
There are people out there, you know, that would listen to you and have a conversation with you without the judgment. I just think you've been very unfortunate to be surrounded by people who do judge you.
Someone told me that the other day as well. Like, you're like one of the most unluckiest people I know.
It does sound like it, because I promise you, not everyone is like that, especially from our community. There are people out there who will listen to you. You know?
I hope I find those people, man.
You will.
If you know any, send them my way. Because it's hard to find in this town, because you're from Bedford. In this town, it's hard to find.
I think the fact that you didn't move out from Northampton is a big negative in that sense. In that specific context, not moving out from Northampton has sort of done you an injustice, because for me, Bedford is all great and all, but moving to Birmingham has meant that I've met people from all walks of life. And it has meant that I'm a little more familiar with Pakistani culture is just a big culture in Asian community, Muslim Asian communities, because it's the biggest group. Everyone knows about Pakistanis and what they get up to, right? But it has helped me learn more about Bengalis, Nigerians, you know, Albanians,
Somalians,
you know, like all sorts of people. And there are definitely people out there who won't judge you for being who you are. Like there are definitely.
You're giving me hope, so I definitely agree.
There are definitely people out there. I promise you, there are definitely people out there.
Man. I guess to top this all off, what would you say to someone, regardless of ethnicity and background, if you only had like 10-15 seconds to say a piece of advice to those who are struggling mentally right now as they're listening or watching, depending on which platform you're on, what would you say to anyone struggling mentally?
It does get better.
I agree.
It does get better. I can't sit here and claim I know what you're going through, difficulties you've had, you know, the traumatic experiences you've had, or anything like that. Like no one can really claim that. No one, even if someone has 99% similar background experience, that 1% could make or break someone's, you know, it could change someone from not committing suicide to committing suicide, right? It's difficult to say, but it does get better. It does get better.
I speak from personal experiences as well.
Yeah,
so.
It does get better. There's, you know, there's that corny, cheesy quote that says it's always dark it's darkest before dawn.
Yeah.
It does get better.
It's
eventually.
cliche, but it's true for a reason
It's
and popular
so
for
true.
a reason.
Yeah, it does get better. You know, I don't know what sort of difficulties people are going through, but it does get better. You know, I don't know how it gets better. I don't know when it gets better. I don't know who helps, but life has a very strange way of working.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can't really figure it out. Yin and yang is what I believe in. Like,
yeah.
Dark, like you can't have the sun without the moon.
Yeah.
You know, you can't have black without the white. It's there. Like the hard times will make you appreciate the greater times even more.
Yeah.
And
you know, it's sort of like when you're in hospital and you have that heartbeat machine. It's like if you're not going up and down, you're
dead.
Yeah, you're
because
dead.
if life was a straight line, then you'd be dead.
Yeah, and there's it's I don't want to sound so insensitive to say, but it's sort of like adds spice to life. You know.
Yeah, I completely get it builds your character.
Yeah, it does.
Think of any movie you watch. Like there's obviously Act 1, Act 2, Act 3.
Exactly.
The character doesn't be like, oh, achieved.
Yeah.
They'll be like, oh shit, came across something.
Yeah.
Oh, nothing.
100%.
It just keeps going.
And you write in your journal.
Story.
You
treat your life like a movie.
Exactly. And you know, like it's in that movie, you know, like you take any really good popular movie, Avengers.
Yeah.
You know, Robert Downey Jr.'s character, Iron Man, he died at the end of it. Sorry for. Yeah, I watched it. I'm sorry, but the guy dies. I'm sorry.
If you haven't watched it, it's your fault.
Yeah, it's your fault. It's such a popular film. That's why I picked this one.
Hugely popular.
Yeah, Iron Man dies, and that's sort of like in real life. If you want to look at it, like there will be, you can't avoid it. There are going to be people who are sad, people who are happy, people who've got a lot of money, people who are poor, and then there are going to be people who die, whether it's intentionally, whether it's because of sickness or illness. These are sorts of things that you have to get to grips with, you know. But I don't really know what to say about that, because I mean, personally, I haven't really experienced significant mental health issues.
You don't want to, that shit's hell.
Yeah, I don't think I would ever want that issue. I think I'm a little fortunate in that regard, so I can't really speak on it because I don't know all that much about it. But for people who do go through it, you know, the only thing that could really be said from my perspective is that it does get better. You know, from the stories that I've heard from people.
Agreed.
Yeah.
You're sitting right in front of someone as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, that is pretty much it for today's episode.
Fantastic.
It's pretty much fucking flew by. Jesus fucking Christ.
Really? How long have we spoken for?
Almost like 48 minutes.
Really? How long was the podcast scheduled for?
It was supposed to be we're supposed to record an hour and a half ago, but obviously logistics happened.
Yeah.
So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for
Thank
watching.
you for having me on
It's
the
okay,
podcast.
man.
I appreciate that.
So if you guys want, do you have social media?
No, not really. I'm very anti-social media.
This guy knows his shit. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed
I'll plug my business in it, Athena Virtual Tours.
I think we already did.
Really?
For Hassan's episode.
Really?
Your episode is after Hassan.
Oh yeah.
So
you
yeah,
did say
Athena
that.
Virtual Tours. If you didn't check out last time, make sure you stupid idiots check out again. I'm joking. I love you guys.
Check out Athena Virtual Tours if you want some cool films.
Yeah, I'm a part of it as well.
Yeah,
so
there we go.
cool.
You know.
So yeah, thank you very much. Is there anything else you want to say, or?
No, man. Thank you for having me on.
It's cool, man.
I
I appreciate you coming and being open. You know.
Thank you.
So yeah,
Cool.
thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys until the next episode. Peace.